Hey, okay, we're live. Okay, great.
All right. Well, hi everybody. My name is Darius Kazemi. I'm an artist based in Portland, Oregon. Um, I'm a programmer by training. I actually, actually, I'm not a programmer by training, I should say. I'm an engineer by training, a game developer by my first career, and then more recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, I started being a professional web developer. And it was really when I got into web development that I started playing with text more so than ever before. Um, I got While I was working in games, I was very interested in procedural generation of things. Whenever I would sit down and make a game, I would always build the map generator first. I was always fascinated with algorithms that built creative stuff. So I like to build level generators. I like to build treasure tables. There are these things called treasure tables. If you've played Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, it's usually just it's literally just these tables, and you roll dice, and the first die roll tells you what type of weapon it is, and the second die roll tells you what magical power it has, and the third die roll tells you if it's like rare or common or something. That's an example of a treasure table. And video games use this too, and so I always used to like to build those as well. I would build these little spreadsheets that would just generate all sorts of weapons for a game that I thought would exist, but I would always just build the part that generated weapons or levels, and then I would never build the rest of the game. And I considered that an artistic failure on my part, a creative failure. And then a few years ago, I realized pretty much that I could just do that part and just call it a day. Make it into a complete work. And so I started building Twitter bots. I was on Twitter a lot, and I liked being on Twitter. I still do, and I started building things like I built a bot called Metaphor Minute, which was really my first Twitter bot. It wasn't. It was technically my second, but it was really my first in this sort of elit space. And it generates one metaphor every other minute, and and that's it. And they're just these. It's Mad Lib style. It just says a noun is a noun, adjective, adjective, and with that I was just off. I started making bots maybe once a month after that, and now I make bots on average 3 times a month, once a week, something like that. I have dry periods, and I have more fertile periods creatively. But I think maybe some of the stuff I can do, I'll actually share my screen here, and I'll show you some of the stuff that I've made. I guess I can remove this "my mic is working" thing from the screen. Okay. Can you see a website on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, good. This is my website. It's just easy for me to find my projects here. Some of my more popular projects are things like I had this project called Random Shopper, and what Random Shopper was it was a bot that I gave. So I liked the feeling of when I would order something, like back order something on Amazon, and it would, and like a year later, I would get it, and it was sort of like a present I got from myself in the past, and so I wanted to just give myself that feeling more often, and so I gave a bot a $50 Amazon gift card once a month, and it just bought me stuff and shipped it to me. So I can sort of, so I would get these weird books like Palmistry for All by Cairo. Cairo was a very, very famous, like sort of, celebrity magician type of thing, but he was a palm reader in the early 20th century, and he wrote this book called Palmistry for All. It's about how to read palms. And because it was written before 1926 or whatever, it is not in copyright. So you can actually actually read Palmistry for All on Project Gutenberg. Well, Amazon, there are a lot of publishers. I'm doing air quotes right now, you can't see it, but there are a lot of, quote, publishers who simply scrape Project Gutenberg and use print-on-demand technology to provide Project Gutenberg books in print form and sell them on Amazon. And really, I think their business model is like they either hope that you search for a Charles Dickens book and you buy their version versus the Penguin version, but also there are cases where you might be Googling something like an obscure older book and not realize that it's out of copyright, find it on Amazon, and then buy their version as well. So they haven't written any of these books. And of course, it's all computer generated. They don't do all these books by hand. It's all automatically generated, and so you end up with stuff like this. I'll blow this up. Kessinger Publishing's rare reprints, thousands of scarce and hard to find books. Blank, 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 blank. Yeah, they are hard to find. And so you end up with, and the other funny thing about this book is that it's a palm reading book, so the diagrams are crucial, but they didn't reprint any of the diagrams. So the whole book is filled with, like, you know, look at refer to figure 2, and there is no figure 2. Anyway, so that was Random Shop, and of course I got like actual books, you know, written by people who are trying to sell things. I got this book of poetry by David Ferry called Bewilderment, a National Book Award winner. So some of the books I got were good, and some weren't, and some were generated by people, and some were generated by computers. Other projects, some of my projects are more technical and resource oriented. So I have this project called Corpora, which is built for actually educators and artists, and it's just a collection of lists of things in machine-readable JSON format. So I can go to animals here, and I can go to common, and then here's a big list of common animals. And so if I want to build a Twitter bot that uses a list of animals, I have a starting place here. I don't have to go scrape it from Wikipedia or anything like that. And of course, and I use Corpora all the time in my projects. This is another popular bot of mine. It's called the Sorting Hat bot. It plays the part of the Sorting Hat from Harry Potter, and the way it works is if you follow it, it responds to you, and it puts you in a Hogwarts house with a custom rhyme. This actually uses Rita.js, which I know Mark Sample is very familiar with. And so it does a little rhyme, like the cunning of a wolverine, the body of a flea. In Gryffindor you do belong, since you are really key. And these animals actually come directly from my Corpora list of animals here. So, you know, I use this in my projects. I made this mostly as convenience for myself, you know, but we've had 347 commits to the project from 67 different people. So it's been pretty exciting to see it grow over the last 2 years. And it's actually getting a lot more contributions right now, because this month happens to be another event that I run, which is called NaNoGenMo. I will pull up NaNoGenMo here. So NaNoGenMo is run entirely on GitHub. And it's run in the issues section, which if you haven't used GitHub, the issues section of GitHub is essentially just, it's meant for reporting bugs on a project, but you can also just use it as a forum. And in particular, it's a forum that has good formatting for code if you want to put code snippets. So that's why we use GitHub for this. And so the way that it works is you just, if you want to join, it's happening right now. It's a play on NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, which happens in the month of November, and that's been this thing that's happened on the internet for the last 10 years, where people write a novel. They pledge to write a novel over the course of the month of November. And to me, the most interesting thing about NaNoWriMo is that their only definition of novel is a 50,000 word text. Like and it's the most, I love it because it's the most expansive definition and inclusive definition of the word novel that I can really imagine. it's just about word count. And it's funny too because and so what I did with NaNoGenMo was I said, okay, you're going to write code that generates a novel in the month of November, but again, we only define novel the same way that NaNoWriMo does at 50,000 words. So some people do things like this. A found novel, which uses the Trans-Pacific Partnership as the text, and the source code is get the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Oh yeah, and the other rule is you have to share the source code. I want this to be like a learning opportunity for everybody in the community. So it's no fair to put up an amazing novel and then not have the source code. The other reason I want people to show the source code is that it prevents fraud somewhat. Like we can't have a horse ebooks type situation where someone's pretending to be a bot when they actually aren't. So if we show the code, it's sort of okay, nothing up your sleeve type of situation. And so you can go to NaNoGenMo. You can participate this month if you like. Anyone can participate. You can literally write code that just writes the word meow 50,000 times. I suggested it cheekily in the README, but people have done that, and that is a valid entry. And people are like, oh, but when people hear about NaNoGenMo for the first time, they go, oh, couldn't you print meow out 50,000 times and that would be it? And I'd say yes, but also you could literally participate in NaNoWriMo and write the word meow 50,000 times, and that would also be a valid NaNoWriMo entry. So, we're just mirroring the human writing side of this. Let me see if there's. I'm going to go back to my project page for a second and just see if there's anything else that I really think is. I guess I'll show a few of my other Twitter bots because they're sort of. And I'll show Content Forever and. And some of my more recent stuff as well. So Miraculous Pics is one of my favorites. This is a take off of those awful sort of science porn accounts and history porn accounts on Twitter, which they're literally called like history porn, science porn, and they post captions of like things that are supposed to be historical or scientific, but they're usually wrong. Like they're very often posting fake bad information. And so this just scrapes the text from some of those accounts and then just pairs it up with a random Google image search. So here's James Dean at a Times Square barbershop, 1955. Yeah, elementary. Guy texts his girlfriend to go viral after he confronts her about a dude named Scott, and then you get this, breaking. Is this teen mom engaged? Yeah. So anyway, this one's a recent favorite. This cheating girlfriend got the gift of a lifetime. Nice spa day for her. Content Forever actually came out of one of my. Last year, I did not complete a NaNoGenMo entry, but I did start a few. I had a few aborted attempts. And one of them was for a novel about someone who gets lost in Wikipedia. And so the text of the novel was something like, John opened Wikipedia. He clicked on recent. He clicked on, politics. He clicked on Barack Obama. He read that Barack Obama, and that was like the text of the novel. And I didn't really finish it up. I didn't really like the output, but then I saw a really bad essay on Medium, and I thought, oh, I could repurpose this code as like a little tool. And so what this one does is I can say, give me 10 minutes of content, and I can say, give me 10 minutes of content about. It has to match a Wikipedia article. So hopefully there's something on electronic literature. Let's submit. Nope, something went wrong. Maybe ELIT. Oh, ELIT is a village in Khuzestan rural district in Iran. And then it starts talking, and then what it does here is, so it grabs one of the first 5 paragraphs about this city, Elit, and then what it does on Wikipedia is it grabs one of the links from this sentence and clicks on it and then goes to that article. So it probably found Khuzestan, or Khuestan, excuse me, rural district, and then went to the Wikipedia article for that, and then printed this out. And then it probably went to Mazandaran province in Iran and opened up this thing about the province's pleasant climate. And then, oh, Tehran. Tehran is also the site of Iran's, and it starts to so it's locally coherent. Like each paragraph is related to the next paragraph somehow. Like we're still talking about, 4 paragraphs ago we were talking about a small village in Iran, and now we're talking about Tehran, which is the capital of Iran, and now we're talking about a sports complex in it, and then other Iranian cities, and then we start talking about oil. And now we talk about the term oil field and its history, and then the first successful oil tanker, which is hilariously named the Zoroaster, after an Iranian historical figure. And it kind of crapped out down here, but like I can start with tomato. So this is just an example. What?
I think the last line was something about Echo and the Bunnyman.
Something about Echo and the Bunnyman? Yeah, probably. Unfortunately, I just lost it. But we can start with tomatoes. So we start with the flavor saver, and after a whole bunch of content down here towards the bottom. So we go through like stress tensors. You often end up in mathematics because Wikipedia articles tend to talk about. There's actually this fun Wikipedia game where if you click on the first link from any Wikipedia article and you just keep clicking on the first link, you'll eventually end up at philosophy, because Wikipedia articles tend to categorize things and talk about categories of knowledge, and knowledge is related to epistemology, and epistemology is related to philosophy, etc. And a similar thing happens with math. But anyway, so we end up talking about math, and then Plato, and then India, and then Norway, and then Scandinavia in general. And then Olaf, historical information about whom historical information is sparse. And then the other nice thing about this is if you get an article that you like, you can upload it to a server and share it with your friends. I live in Portland, Oregon. I recently moved here. One thing that people like to do is talk about how weird and quirky Portland is, and I just wanted to show some of the non-quirky parts of Portland. So what I did was I went to Google Maps. I went to areas that I knew to be industrial or commercial, but sort of mostly industrial areas, and I essentially just drew boxes around them. I just found the coordinates to describe squares of latitude and longitude, and I gave that to a bot, which then goes to Google Street View and grabs Google Street View images from these areas of town. And so it's like, wow, these hilarious Portlanders are always up to something wacky, and it's like the back of a Costco or something. So this is just a little cheeky project that I did for that. This is another recent one. This one's called Spinny Machine. This one's not electronic literature. This one's more a simulation type thing, closer to the kind of game work that I did before. Although it does have this text that gets generated at the top, just as a title, because I thought they could use a title. And I like juxtapositions of image and text. I think there's a lot that goes on when you juxtapose the two. And these shapes that this machine draws are cool, but they're even more interesting, I think, with these titles. I've had a lot of people comment. I've had as many people comment on the simple titles that I built for this as I have on the machine itself. And the simple titles was 3 seconds in Rita. I just said, give me, possibly give me a random adverb, and then give me a random adjective, and then give me a random noun. That's all. And I want to talk about, this is my most ELIT project, like sort of traditionally ELIT type project I've done in a long time. This is my first attempt at NaNoGenMo this month. So this is called Harpooneers and Sailors. What I did was I've been playing around with this thing called doc to vec. This is going to get a little technical, but hold on. What happened? Here we are. Doc to vec. I linked to it from here. Wait, no, that's NaNoGenMo. Oh, I linked the wrong link. I'll have to fix that later. Okay, doc to vec. Here's doc to vec. Actually, I'll pull up this tutorial instead. It makes a little bit more sense. And the IPython notebook. Forgive me for not having this already ready. So this is based off a technology called Word2Vec, which I'm sure you've talked about Markov a little bit in class. And Markov is Markov is something that attempts to understand text through statistical analysis. So a Markov process does not understand English at all. It doesn't understand syntax or grammar. All it does is it looks at a text and it knows what words come after what other words, and then it builds a probabilistic model. So it knows that the word of probably never comes after the word the. So you would never see the of in English. And it knows this because you fed in a bunch of source text. So it'll say, okay, well, I have the word the, so I know my next word is not going to be of, but it might be house, because I've seen the house before. And it just builds more and more rules. But it also knows that of the would be very, very likely. So it'll go, well, I have of now, maybe I will pick the. That's basically how Markov works. It just probabilistically understands what the likelihood of one word coming after another is. Word2Vec is this other technology that I'm not even going to try to describe, but it builds a 300-dimensional vector based on millions of words that you give it. It's called a bag of words model. Much like Markov, it does not understand language at all, so it actually is language neutral. It works just as well in Spanish as it does in English as it does in Chinese, which is kind of amazing. It's a very heavy machine learning thing. In order to use this technology, I actually had to pay $40 and rent a server for a month to churn away at this. And what doc2vec does is, so this is an example of someone giving doc2vec a bunch of IMDb reviews, and then it goes through all this training process, blah, blah, blah. It's very technical and boring, and it trains a whole data set. And then at the very end, the part that we actually care about is you can give it a document, and a document is just any snippet of text, and then it'll try and find the most and least similar documents in the set as well. So starting with one of the IMDb reviews about how something was one of the best films of the year and they really liked it, the most similar model that it found with 70% similarity was someone saying, I thought this movie would be dumb, but I really liked it. Okay, 8 out of 10. And then the median one is actually somebody who both loved and hated the movie. And then the least similar one was both stylistically not similar because it's this incredibly long review, but it's also someone who just hated the Lord of the Rings movies completely. And so it's a very interesting technology. And so what I did with this was I said, okay, let's take every line of Pride and Prejudice. So I took the top 50 most popular books on Project Gutenberg, and I fed them into this thing, and I had it build up a corpus and analyze the corpus. It took about a day for the computer to analyze the whole thing and get it all together and ready, pre-processed. And then I said, okay, I'm just going to go through each line of Pride and Prejudice and find the most similar line in the novel. So I'll actually do this live right now for you. I am not sure why this is. Hold on one second. Here we go. So I'm just logging into that server that I provisioned, and so this is sitting somewhere in Atlanta, I think. And here's my code, but I think what I'm going to do is, let me make sure index here is, yeah, okay, good. And then I'm just going to change. I'm going to change one probability here so it does the thing that I want it to. And I think this should work. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to open up Pride and Prejudice itself, so we can refer to it. Where's the? Oh, come on. Really, the Gutenberg Pride and Prejudice is not even on the first page of. Like that's really sad. Like I feel like the free version of a book should be the first thing that appears when you search Google for a book. Okay, so yes, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and so the first line of this of the novel is, of course, Pride and Prejudice, and the most similar line to that is Harpooneers and Sailors. The second most similar line is History of Life and Death. The third most similar line is Rape of the Lock. And then like all these other things here. And most of them are titles, and they're all in all caps, and that's because the version of the book that I fed into this put the title in all caps. So it's going to go find something else in all caps. And again, it doesn't understand capital letters at all. It's really eerie. It just sort of builds a big statistical model about what things are similar to what other things. It's very strange. And what you're seeing here is actually a second project that I'm working on where the algorithm is giving me 10 choices, and then I pick which one I like best. So I can say, okay, yeah, I want Harpooneers and Sailors to be the first line of the book. And now it goes to the second line, which is by Jane Austen. And it thinks the most similar thing to by Jane Austen is by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Well, that actually makes sense. And then the next one is by, and then Traveling by Rail, and then by Herman Melville. Let's make this one by Herman Melville, because it's called Harpooneers and Sailors. It should probably be by Melville. And then it opens with chapter 1. Well, it thinks the most similar thing here is chapter 39. But chapter 1 is its second choice, so as an editor I could say, okay, do that. And then you have the famous opening line. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Well, the most similar line is, it is a witchery of social czarship of which there is no withstanding. Okay, I mean that's actually pretty close in sort of syntax to that opening sentence, so we'll start with that. And then we can just keep on going. So the project that I'm working on long-term for this is actually a co-authored novel where I am kind of editing as the algorithm goes. It's a game that you can play with anyone. Write down 10 first sentences to a novel, pass them over to the other person. They pick the one they like best, pass it back to you, and then you write 10-second sentences. And then you keep going. And I like it because it asks questions about, well, authorship, who actually wrote this? I mean, in a way, I am, even though I didn't write any of the words, I am completely dictating the form of the novel as it goes. So I'm calling it co-authored, but I hope people have an interesting conversation about who authors it or not. So I'm going to have to answer like 3,000 multiple choice questions to finish this book, basically. And I'm going to do it over the course of the month. But as a quick opener, I said, okay, I won't make any choices, and I'll just have the algorithm pick what it thinks is most likely. I ended up filtering it so that it doesn't pick any sentences from Pride and Prejudice itself. And so here it is, Harpooneers and Sailors by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Chapter 1. It is a witchery of social czarship, which there is no withstanding. Although there is little recorded of the youth of Machiavelli, the Florence of those days is so well known that the early environment of this representative citizen may be easily imagined. Then pray consult, said Holmes, shutting his eyes once more. I answered that I had not. Yes, the widow told me all about it. No answer. Do you know him? I have no questions to ask him. This was satisfactory. And so on and so forth. And it's funny, it ends up having structure. It starts on chapter 1, and then it moves to chapter 2. I didn't tell it to put chapters in there, but because Pride and Prejudice is divided into chapters, this book is divided into chapters as well. And it mostly is sequential. It goes chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. Although I think it does do 4, and then it ends up like skipping chapter 12 or something, and then it goes back to chapter 3 at one point. So it's not perfect, but it's really interesting to see where the algorithm goes with all of this. And it's interesting to read, and it has the shape of a book. So I'm pretty happy with this for like a 3-day effort for NaNoGenMo. Anyway, I've been talking for a while, so I think I want to open this up to questions or comments or anything. I'm going to turn off the screen share for now. I might turn it back on in a bit. But that's kind of an overview of what I've done and like what I'm working on right now.
Great, thanks. I'll see. I have some questions, but I want to see if the students have any questions first. Does anybody have questions about this stuff? How it fits in? Yeah.
We read an article last night about an interview you did. I forgot if it was The Verge or something, some magazine like that, I think. And then you said these works that you create are normally only intelligible in snippets, kind of like what we just saw. What's the point of creating that? Or what do you get out of creating something like that?
Well, first of all, the stuff that I create makes me laugh. So that's like that's actually like literally my primary reason I make anything is I think it's funny, so I do it. The other thing that I like about content that creates itself is, if I make something directly, so if I just write something, I can never be surprised by the thing. I can be surprised by reactions to the thing, I can be surprised by interpretations of the thing, but if I write a novel or a poem or I build a level for a video game, I'm never going to be surprised by that. But if I have a computer, if I write something that writes things, I'm surprised all the time. So my whole day is me looking at my Twitter feed. I mean, it's not my whole day, but like a big part of the background radiation of my life is that I have all these things that I've made that are constantly making things for me, and I'm very often pleasantly surprised. Every single day I scroll back through the previous day's miraculous picks, and I bust out laughing at least once. And I don't think I could. I was reading this Pride and Prejudice book last night, and it's amazing to read a book that you sort of wrote for the first time. Like it's this really weird, uncanny feeling. And actually, I refer to it. I think it's actually similar in a lot of ways, not in most ways, but in several important ways. It's almost similar to having children or students or mentees. I've had students, who I've taught things go on and do interesting things with that knowledge that surprised me and delighted me, and that's one of the joys of teaching. And I get a similar feeling from this bot. It's also from these bots. It's also similar to having. I don't have any kids myself, but I imagine in some ways it's similar to when a child makes something for you, and you can tell that they're sort of ingesting the information that you've given them and raised them with, and they're kind of doing their own thing with it and then giving it back to you. And so there's a great pleasure in that as well. So really, I do this because it's pleasurable to me. It makes me laugh. It makes me smile. That's like my primary motivation. I would continue to do all this stuff if nobody else cared at all.
Yeah, can we just follow up, because the idea of bots, say, being your children, and can you take us back to the thing that happened with Metaphor a minute, where you felt like it had grown up and developed its own attitude? And because I think it gets us beyond just conceptualism.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the so Metaphor Minute was kind of my first bot, and at one point it said a metaphor that contained a slur for homosexual people, and I was completely taken aback. I didn't even know that I was using this service called WordNick, which is a sort of an online dictionary, and they have an API that you can access. And at the time, I didn't realize WordNick is a very descriptivist dictionary. It just scrapes the internet for language, and so it'll have wonderful new words, but it'll also have horrible new words, as well as all sorts of slang and every other kind of language. So, of course, it has like bad words in it too. And Metaphor Minute actually came up with something. It used this slur for homosexual people, and then it also, but then the adjective it said was not heterosexual, which I was like, whoa, okay, that was an interesting. Like literally, it was that word and then not the phrase not heterosexual, which was just a coincidence, but it was really interesting. And of course, so I deleted the tweet because I didn't want my bot saying that sort of thing. And then I had to really think about what just happened there. And because I was sort of conceptualizing these bots as my kids, it did feel to me very much like, oh, my innocent child is now a teenager and has a mouth and is it's like not under my control in the way that I maybe originally thought. And so now, unlike a teenager, I do literally control these bots. And so I actually built a special module called Word Filter, where I put a bunch of words by default that I did not want any of my bots ever saying, mostly like racist and sexist words, like slurs and that sort of thing that I just didn't want appearing at all. I don't care about scatological words, but I also, there's a way, if you want to download that module, you can use it yourself, and you can delete words that are currently in there, and you can add your own words. If you don't want it to say the word pineapple, you can add the word pineapple to the list. And it's just a simple blacklist. And the rule of thumb there is just I don't want my bots saying any words that I would not be comfortable saying myself. It's just a rule of thumb that I came up with, because I do feel that so if I'm going to take any artistic credit for what my bots make, I also have to take responsibility for what they say. I don't think you can have it both ways. You can't claim yourself as an artist and as like an author of a work, and not also claim declaim yourself from all responsibility. I just don't think that's morally or ethically correct. So yeah, because I take artistic responsibility, I think it's incumbent on me to take a moral responsibility and ethical responsibility for these bots and what they do. So on the moral side, it's things like racial slurs and sexist words and things like that I just don't want the bots saying. And that also goes more into how I design these bots as well. When I do Google Images searches, I make sure Safe Search is turned on. I try to pick stuff that's mostly Creative Commons licensed, although Miraculous Picks just pulls willy-nilly from Google Images. So I'm not. Sometimes I do think that it's transformative enough that I can get away with it, but I try to use open data sources. And then on the ethical side, there are things like rules around spamming and so forth that I try to be very conscientious of. So I try to make bots that don't spam people. I actually had something very interesting happen the other day. I'll switch back to a screen share quickly. And so I have this bot called Professor Jocular. And what Professor Jocular does is he goes to the Favestar tweets of the day, which are mostly jokes, and then attempts to describe them. So, like, here's a joke: any carpet can be magic when you're on it with the right person. And he says it's a Manus joke. He's using something called concept net. It's this project. It's an ontology. So it basically is this big database that understands that a dog is an animal, and an animal is a living organism, and a living organism is an organism, and so it like understands how things are sort of categorized, and so it's just pulling a random word from this and trying to figure out what that is. I don't know where that one came up, but here's one. You know, he makes sure he's present in my day even when life throws up obstacles. I notice, and it looked at day and said time, so it's like time joke. Okay, cool. Or this thing about do we become the mask we wear is a concealment joke because the word mask is in there. And you'll notice that I'm manually retweeting people and I'm putting a dot here. And the reason is this was a design compromise. I didn't want to just not credit the people for these jokes, but I also didn't want to spam them. And there's no way to retweet or link to a tweet in Twitter without spamming people. Like if I quoted this tweet or I put an @ there, the Alex P would receive that, and that's literally a violation of Twitter's terms of service. And so I said, well, I'll split the difference. I won't notify them, but I will include their username in here so that if someone did, so that you know, you would look at this and you would go, oh, okay, well clearly this was written by someone called the Alex P. I did, but I had this. There was this Twitter account that tries to call out plagiarism. I think it's called Plagiarism is Bad, and it replied to the tweet saying, "Hey, you can't do this. You're stealing people's jokes." And I was like, well, and I responded. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm stealing people's jokes. I'm just working within the terms of service and trying to credit people as best I can without also spamming them. And so, but that was interesting. They didn't seem very happy with that response. But it's this weird gray area where the rules of Twitter and then what's considered good etiquette are maybe a little bit at odds with one another.
Cool. Do you have time for another question?
I do have time for another question.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious, what prompted you to switch from engineering to programming to becoming like a digital artist?
Well, I wouldn't say that I switched from programming to becoming an artist. Like, I mean, I still consider myself a programmer. You know, that's just like I don't know, like a poet is still a writer, right? So you know, I practice just like there are plenty of for example, there are plenty of poets who are also professors, and so you know they are both of those things. They are poets and professors. They didn't give up one to do the other, and that's kind of where I am too. My job is I actually my wife and I run a creative technology cooperative called Field Train here in Portland, and I do, you know, web development work. I build, now it's creative stuff, so it's typically building bots for people or interactive websites and things like that. But it's very much work for hire. It's very much, oh, I'm doing engineering work. I have to deliver good code. I have to do all this other stuff. And on top of that, I'm maintaining all these libraries. I have a bunch of tools that I maintain, including that word filter thing, including Corpora. So, you know, I'm very much a practicing programmer all the time, and I can sit down and make a, you know, database application with the best of them. You know, my artistic practice is alongside that, so I kind of do both. What I guess to get more at the question that I think might be underneath that is, you know, what maybe made me switch from like being exclusively the kind of person who programs, you know, websites to keep track of inventory for, you know, large companies or something, to making this other kind of work. And I was actually, that was a very specific moment. I read a book called Alien Phenomenology by Ian Bogost. He's a professor at Georgia Tech, and maybe you came across some of his stuff in your class. I don't know if you're gonna cover any of his work, but he in that book is about a lot of things, but one of the things that it talks about is how it's a book of philosophy, and in it he has this provocation, which is that if we're going to, it essentially boils down to, if we're going to philosophize about things that are sort of beyond the limits of human language, maybe we shouldn't limit ourselves to just using human language to explore these concepts. And so he talked about a concept called carpentry, which is the process of building an object that does sort of critical and philosophical work. Actually, my Metaphor Minute bot was a piece of carpentry that I did in response to a chapter on metaphor in that book. So instead of writing an essay about metaphor and its utility in philosophy, I instead built this Metaphor Minute bot, and the bot was my commentary on it. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing here is just, it's critique. It's the same kind of work I did before, where I would like encounter something in the world and I would write a blog post about it, you know. But instead of writing a blog post about how annoying it is that, you know, people talk about how quirky Portland is all the time, they don't realize that there are, you know, industrial areas of Portland and lower income areas of Portland and places that aren't like hilarious Portlandia quirky about it here. Instead of writing that essay on Medium or whatever and getting a few reads, I built a Twitter bot about it instead. And I feel like the bot gets relatively the same point across. And I think it's funnier in a lot of ways too, and perhaps more effective in certain ways than me just writing it would have been. So a lot of this is just, this sort of goes back to the other question too. I do this stuff to make me laugh, but this is also my critical reflex to the world. I write a lot fewer blog posts now, and I write a lot more Twitter bots and tools and that sort of thing.
Great, thanks. I don't want to keep you from your regular morning routine there in Portland, but this has been so fantastic for you to.
That's fine.
By class, and it always helps to put like a face to the people that we're reading about and whose work we're studying, and it also provides a lot of context. I think, when I say something, they take it one way, but when actual people who do this stuff, say it, it makes more sense. So thanks a lot, and I'll share your Twitter stuff with students so they can track you down if they want to bother you something online, and it's been great.
Awesome, and I just want to say it was great talking to you all, and consider doing NaNoGenMo. You still have like 25 days left. So
you do a lot of novels in that time.
Bye.
All right, thanks, Darius. Thanks.